Bryan Kohberger's selfie. On November 13, 2022, a horrific crime shocked Moscow, Idaho. 4 University of Idaho students, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered in an off-campus house. The attacker, armed with a knife, entered the home between 3 and 5 a.m. while the victims slept. 2 surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, were unharmed despite being present during the attack. The 3-story house on King Road was known as a student gathering spot. Madison and Kaylee occupied the 3rd floor, Xana and Ethan the 2nd, and Dylan and Bethany the 1st. After a night out, the victims returned home by 2 a.m. Around 4 a.m., a food delivery arrived for Xana. Shortly after, Dylan heard noises, including crying and a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'll help you." She later glimpsed a masked figure in black leaving the house. Dylan described the intruder as a man about 5'10" with an athletic build and bushy eyebrows, wearing a black balaclava mask that covered his entire face except his eyes. The bodies were discovered hours later at noon. Bryan Kohberger, 28, a criminology PhD student at nearby Washington State University, was arrested weeks later. Originally from Pennsylvania, he earned degrees in psychology and criminal justice, studying under experts in serial killers. Colleagues described him as intelligent but socially awkward, with a history of condescension toward women. His research focused on criminal behavior, including surveys asking offenders about their emotions during crimes. Prosecutors later revealed a chilling 12-page essay Kohberger wrote during his time at DeSales University titled Crime Scene Scenario Final. The paper, described as a how-to for handling a crime scene, detailed forensic strategies for a hypothetical stabbing, including photographing defensive wounds, analyzing hesitation marks, and avoiding evidence contamination. Prosecutors argue this essay demonstrates his obsession with murder and knowledge of police procedures. Investigators found Kohberger had stalked the King Road house at least 12 times prior to the murders, often late at night. He drove a white Hyundai Elantra, lacking a front license plate as registered in Pennsylvania. 10 months before the murders, he purchased a black balaclava mask from a Dick's Sporting Goods in Pittsburgh, a mask prosecutors say was identical to the one described by Dylan. On the night of the crime, his phone was turned off during the attack but tracked traveling between Pullman, Washington and Moscow, Idaho. Security footage captured his car near the house during the murders. Kohberger allegedly entered through a sliding door, attacking the victims with a knife. A leather sheath, later found on Maddie's bed, contained DNA matching Kohberger's. The next morning, he returned to the area, possibly monitoring police activity. He resumed classes but grew withdrawn. A selfie taken 6 hours after the murders, showing Kohberger's distinctively bushy eyebrows, was cited by prosecutors as corroborating Dylan's eyewitness account. Police identified the Hyundai Elantra via surveillance. Washington State University linked the car to Kohberger. DNA from the sheath was matched to trash at his Pennsylvania home. On December 30th, FBI agents arrested him there. He was found sealing trash in plastic bags, possibly to hide evidence. Items seized included black clothing, a gun, and a knife. Kohberger faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and burglary. His trial, initially set for June 2023, is now scheduled for August 2025 after delays. Prosecutors cite cell data, DNA, and eyewitness accounts, including Dylan's sketch of the balaclava mask and her description of the intruder's eyebrows. They argue Kohberger's academic background encouraged him to try to commit the perfect crime, pointing to his criminology essay and mask purchase as evidence of premeditation. Motive remains unclear, though speculation includes obsession with one victim or a desire to test his knowledge of criminal investigations. The King Road house was donated to the university and demolished. Kohberger, a vegan, remains jailed in Idaho, closely following case updates. His defense claims innocence, but evidence against him is substantial. Key mysteries include why the survivors were spared and how Kohberger selected his victims. Despite his criminology expertise, critical errors, leaving the sheath, using his car, and failing to obscure his eyebrows led to his capture. This photo captures what appears to be an ordinary summer day in America, showing a man casually enjoying time with neighborhood children. However, there's a chilling twist. The man pictured is Ted Bundy, one of history's most notorious serial killers. Behind this normal-looking photo lies the dark reality of a criminal responsible for the deaths of over 30 victims. Ali Naderi went missing on August 23, 2020, in British Columbia, Canada. On that day, Naderi was hiking Eagle Mountain, a favorite destination thanks to its easily accessible location near the Vancouver suburbs. The area offers a variety of trails for hiking, mountain biking, and even horseback riding. Although it remains wild, Eagle Mountain is relatively less isolated compared to deeper wilderness spots. The 52-year-old Naderi had frequented Eagle Mountain so often that reports suggested he might have hiked there almost daily, meaning he knew the area and its terrain well. However, on August 23, 2020, something went terribly wrong when Naderi ventured into the woods and never returned to his vehicle. His car, parked at the trailhead near some homes, caught the attention of a neighbor on the night he vanished, leading to a quick missing persons report, a critical early development in the case. The search received another boost on the second day when investigators recovered a photo taken on the day he disappeared. Captured by a motion-activated trail camera, the image showed Naderi hiking along the familiar trail, much like he had done countless times before. It remains unclear who owned the camera or why it was installed along the trail, but the photograph was pivotal to the investigation. It placed Naderi at a precise location at a specific time, allowing authorities to narrow down the search area. Yet rather than serving as the breakthrough that would reunite his family with him, the photo eventually morphed into a disturbing snapshot of what was likely his final day. The search lasted a full week, with hundreds of volunteers deploying drones, dogs, helicopters, and other resources. They reportedly scoured approximately 48,000 square meters of trail, and the search was eventually suspended. A man hiking a familiar, well-trafficked area, with photographic evidence confirming his presence at a known time during a mild summer, yet he simply vanished. Foul play was not seriously suspected, and no clear theories have emerged about what happened after that fateful photo was taken. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès was born on January 9, 1961, in Versailles, France, into an aristocratic family with roots stretching back to the pre-revolutionary era. His father, Bernard de Ligonnès, was an engineer educated at the prestigious École Centrale Paris, while his mother, Geneviève, was a devout Catholic whose rigid religious practices dominated Xavier's upbringing. The family's lineage included military officers, a viceroy, bishops, and knights of the Legion of Honor, a heritage that instilled in Xavier a deep sense of entitlement and social status. Despite their wealth, his childhood was austere and regimented. He attended daily mass at 6 a.m., memorized Latin prayers, and participated in catechism classes, though he later confessed these rituals felt hollow, fostering resentment rather than faith. A defining trauma occurred when Xavier was 10 years old. His father, Bernard, a charismatic but unreliable figure described as a playboy, abandoned the family and moved to Africa, leaving only sporadic letters as contact. This abandonment destabilized Xavier, exacerbating his emotional detachment and fueling a lifelong struggle with identity. Despite this upheaval, he completed his education, earning a bachelor's degree in industrial technology and sustainable development at 20. However, his professional life floundered. He worked as a salesman and launched a series of vague, unsuccessful businesses, including Cellule, a company targeting traveling salespeople and restaurant clients. Financial instability plagued him, and by his 40s, he was drowning in over 150,000 euros of debt. In the 1980s, Xavier met Agnès Hervieux, a single mother raising a son, Arthur, from a previous relationship. The couple married in 1991, and Xavier adopted Arthur, an unusual choice in their conservative Catholic circles. They later had 3 biological children, Thomas, Anne, and Benoit. To outsiders, the family appeared idyllic, a middle-class household in Nantes with 2 Labrador dogs, Privately, however, the marriage strained under Xavier's controlling behavior. In 2004, Agnès anonymously confided on a French forum about her fear of her husband's authoritarianism, writing, "The father is the head. He gives an order. We execute it without questioning." The family's financial collapse accelerated in early 2011 after Bernard's death. Xavier, hoping to inherit wealth to resolve his debts, discovered there was no money left. Desperate and humiliated, he began planning a horrific escape. In March 2011, he inherited his father's .22 caliber rifle, practiced shooting at a range, and purchased a silencer, cement, lime, and digging tools. On the night of April 4, he drugged Agnès, 21, Benoit, 18, Arthur, and the family dogs with sleeping pills, then shot each twice in the head. He buried their bodies under the terrace in the backyard, covering them with lime to hasten decomposition, and placing religious icons on their shrouds. The next day, Xavier lured Thomas, 25, their eldest, home by fabricating a story about Agnes being injured in a cycling accident. That evening, the pair dined at La Table de la Bergerie, an upscale restaurant in Nantes, where witnesses noted Thomas appeared ill, and the meal was eerily silent. After returning home, Xavier murdered Thomas and buried him with the others. To conceal the crime, Xavier spun elaborate lies. He told friends the family had entered the U.S. Witness Protection Program due to his work as a DEA informant, and informed schools they had moved to Australia. On April 11th, neighbors grew suspicious after finding a note on the door instructing, "Return all mail to sender," and reported the family's absence. Police discovered the bodies on April 21st, but Xavier had already vanished. In his final days, he methodically erased traces of his life. He closed bank accounts, settled bills, and visited nostalgic locations. On April 12th, he checked into a luxury hotel in southern France, dined alone on expensive wine, and withdrew cash in Lassay-sur-Quan, a town tied to his past. The last confirmed sighting was on April 15, 2011, when he left a budget hotel in Roquebrune-sur-Argens carrying a large bag, likely containing the murder weapon. The final known images of Xavier were captured during these fleeting moments, snapshots of a man who had just brutally murdered his entire family. An international arrest warrant was swiftly issued, and Xavier's photograph flooded media outlets worldwide, turning him into one of Europe's most recognizable fugitives. Despite one of France's largest manhunts, involving hundreds of officers, search dogs, and Interpol alerts, Xavier disappeared without a trace. Over the years, false leads emerged. A 2015 letter claiming "I am still alive," sent to a journalist, a 2018 raid on a monastery after a Xavier lookalike monk was reported, and a 2019 false arrest of a man in Scotland. None yielded breakthroughs. Some theorize Xavier committed suicide in southern France's remote wilderness, citing emails he sent in 2010 referencing collective suicide and self-immolation. Others believe his meticulous planning, destroying documents, withdrawing cash, hints at a new identity abroad. A fringe theory, fueled by Xavier's own lies, suggests he entered witness protection, though the DEA denies any involvement. As of 2024, Xavier remains on France's most wanted list. At first glance, the image of Araki eating donuts seems completely harmless. A simple photo of the famous manga artist Hoichi Araki, best known for creating JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, enjoying 2 large donuts. Yet some people find the picture strangely unsettling. A rumor began that just looking at the image could infect your computer with a virus that might randomly trigger a jump scare later in the day. Because jump scares can be very startling, many people chose to avoid the photo altogether. But where did this odd story come from? And why was this picture linked to such a bizarre idea? A team of online researchers decided to investigate the history of both the picture and the rumor. They discovered that the Araki donut photo had been shared online for quite some time, with posts going back to around 2014. However, the photo itself actually comes from an even older source. On October 5, 2012, Hoichi Araki released a special magazine called JoJo Manun to celebrate the 25th anniversary of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The magazine featured exclusive artwork, interviews, and articles. One article described a visit Araki made to a flea market in Brooklyn during his trip to New York City. Among several pictures of the market was a memorable image of Araki eating 2 large donuts, likely bought from a nearby stand. The picture was taken with a high-quality magazine camera, making it very clear and detailed for its time. When the image was scanned and uploaded online, its file size often reached 3 to 4 megabytes in PNG format. While the picture looks ordinary, its unusual clarity and the fact that it shows something as mundane as eating donuts made some people suspicious. They wondered why anyone would take such a high-resolution photo of a simple act like eating donuts. This suspicion mixed with real online security worries at that time. In the early 2010s, image-based malware was a serious concern. Hackers could hide harmful code inside images using tricks like steganography or the magic PNG thumbnail exploit. If an image was opened in a web browser, it could secretly download malware or viruses. Because of these fears, some users, especially those not well versed in computer security, became paranoid that the clear donut photo might be one of these traps. Moreover, the visible pixelation artifacts from the magazine print made the image look a bit like the kind of pixelated images sometimes used to set up jump scares. As with many online urban legends, people began to exaggerate the original story. Some even called the picture the Donut Man and compared it to other strange image legends. This mix of computer fears and online horror stories created what some researchers call the creepypasta effect, an urban legend that grows and changes over time, becoming more dramatic and disconnected from its original idea. Vishnu Viswanath and Meenakshi Murthy were a young married couple originally from India. By 2018, they had relocated to the United States for work, travel, and to capture the country's breathtaking landscapes. Naturally, that meant visiting numerous national parks and taking a lot of photos. In March 2018, they visited the Grand Canyon in Arizona and shared a photo on Instagram. Part of the caption read, "A lot of us, including yours truly, are fans of daredevil stunts like standing at the edge of cliffs and skyscrapers. But did you know that wind gusts can be fatal? Is our life worth one photo?" That Instagram post didn't raise many eyebrows at first, but it would later prove tragically ironic. In October 2018, the couple headed to Yosemite National Park in California and made a short trek to a popular spot known as Taft Point. Taft Point features a ledge where hikers can get perilously close, with no railing at all, and countless online photos showcase its sheer drop. Although these images are undeniably scenic, they also highlight a dangerously risky spot. When Viswanath and Murthy arrived at Taft Point, they weren't alone. The area was bustling with around a dozen other hikers. One young couple at the overlook distinctly remembered Murthy, both for her striking bright pink hair and because she was dangerously close to the cliff's edge. Sean Madison recalled, "She gave me the willies, there weren't any railings, and I wasn't about to get that close to the edge." After snapping a few selfies, Madison and his girlfriend left for their car while Viswanath and Murthy stayed behind. Eventually, the couple set up a camera on a tripod in an attempt to capture a photo from the cliff's edge. The following morning, hikers found a chilling scene at Taft Point. A tripod and camera left near the edge with no one in sight. Authorities were notified, and it wasn't long before the bodies of Viswanath and Murthy were recovered at the bottom of the cliff. It appears they had fallen off while trying to take that photo, a tragic end coming just a few months after their Grand Canyon Instagram warning. Further investigation revealed that both Viswanath and Murthy had alcohol in their systems at the time of their deaths. Although the precise level of intoxication was never determined, and there were no reports of them acting belligerently on the trail, it seems they had only had a small amount to drink. Nonetheless, mixing cliff selfies with even a little alcohol proved fatal. There's one more disturbingly eerie twist. After learning about the couple's fate, Sean Madison and his girlfriend reviewed the photos they'd taken that day at Taft Point. In a chilling coincidence, they found that they had inadvertently captured images with Murthy in the background, her vivid pink hair unmistakable. Those photos turned out to be her last. This photo depicts a 1910 prison baseball team with an eerie twist. The incarcerated players weren't just competing for sport, they were fighting to stay alive. The men's executions were postponed indefinitely, but only as long as they kept winning games. The Nessie wormhole film is one of the most enigmatic pieces of footage in the realm of cryptozoology. Captured by John Eric Beckord, a polarizing figure in both cryptozoology and paranormal studies, the film purportedly shows a shape-shifting creature at Loch Ness, hinting that the famed monster might be capable of moving through wormholes. Although Beckord made these extraordinary claims, the original film has been missing for decades, with only a handful of still images surfacing over time. Beckord reportedly presented this footage at the 1987 International Society of Cryptozoology Conference in Edinburgh, where it sparked debate. Observers noted that the film depicted a white, amorphous shape that did not resemble any typical reptilian creature. However, some notable cryptozoologists at the conference, including Dr. Carl Schuker and Professor Henry Bauer, claimed they never saw the film. Efforts to trace the film led Beckord through a series of dead ends. He attempted to contact a woman named Christine, or Chris Pitts, allegedly his fiancée, but no records linked anyone by that name to his narrative. The breakthrough came when he reached out to his sister, Pamela Beckord Forbes, who then connected him with Dr. Molly Squire, a longtime collaborator in his research. Dr. Squire confirmed that the film still exists and is stored along with Beckord's other materials at the Willow Creek China Flat Museum in California. Although it hasn't been digitized for public viewing yet, there are plans to do so. Dr. Squire clarified some common misconceptions about the footage. She described it as a grainy, long shot taken from a distance, showing an elongated form moving through water, while some critics suspected that the image might be nothing more than a boat's wake. She insisted that the object was moving independently, with no boats in its vicinity. Furthermore, she corrected the supposed date of the recording, suggesting that Beckord was more likely filming at Loch Ness between 1986 and 1988, rather than in 1983 as sometimes claimed. Even though the complete film has not been released, a few still images remain. These photos depict a long, white figure moving across the water. While some researchers believe it resembles a plesiosaur, others argue it could be explained as driftwood or simply the play of light on water. Without a definitive conclusion, debate continues over what these images truly represent. These photos show the last moments of Dr. Toni Henthorn's life. Literally just minutes after these pictures were taken, she would fall to her death, 130 feet off a cliff. And as if that wasn't disturbing enough, her fall was no accident. In September of 2012, Toni Henthorn and her husband Harold took a trip to Rocky Mountain National Park to celebrate their 12th wedding anniversary. On September 29th, they decided to go for a short hike up Deer Mountain, a trail reportedly chosen by Harold himself. There were reports that Toni had bad knees and likely didn't have the physical strength for a tough hike, but regardless, that's what they did. By all accounts, the hike began normally. They walked along the trail and took some photos together, smiling, looking happy and wholesome. But this wasn't going to be a normal hike. Harold Henthorn was not a normal husband, and you'll see why. That same afternoon, Toni's brother received a chilling text from Harold. Very urgent, Toni is injured in Estes Park, fall from rock. A disturbing message, no doubt, but the follow-up was even worse. She's gone. Now that's obviously a heartbreaking message, and it marked the beginning of a story filled with suspicion and tragedy. Toni had fallen off a cliff, and Harold called 911. In the call, he said, "My name is Harold Henthorn. I'm in Rocky Mountain National Park. I need an alpine rescue team immediately." He gave his location, Deer Mountain, about a mile south of the visitor center, and described his wife's condition. He said she was in critical condition, had a head injury, and was barely breathing. He also told the dispatcher he'd pay whatever it took to get a helicopter there as quickly as possible. On the surface, Harold sounded like a desperate, caring husband, but when police analyzed the call, they noticed something strange. His tone didn't match the urgency of the situation. It sounded rehearsed, Even more damning was that while Harold was supposedly performing CPR on Tony, he was also sending those text messages, which raised serious questions about whether he was actually trying to save her life. Then investigators searched Harold's car. Inside, they found a map of the Deer Mountain area. Not just any map, this one had the Deer Mountain Trail highlighted in pink. Again, it's not that strange. But what was strange was that the exact rock outcropping where Tony fell was marked with an X. That map was left in the car before the hike, meaning the spot where she fell had been marked in advance. And there was more. In reviewing photos from the hike, they found one of Tony using binoculars. Presumably, those would have been found at the scene of her death. But investigators never recovered them. They were simply gone. Still, all this was suspicious, but not proof. Until investigators dug deeper into Harold's past. That's when everything escalated. Tony wasn't Harold's first wife. In 1995, his first wife, Sandra Lynn Henthorne, died in a bizarre accident. They were driving on a remote road in Colorado when they got a flat tire. While Sandra was retrieving a lug nut from under their Jeep, the vehicle fell off the jack and crushed her. The case was briefly investigated, but ruled an accident. Harold collected $300,000 in life insurance. Fast forward to Tony. Harold had taken out multiple life insurance policies on her, worth $4.5 million. He'd also lied about his employment, fabricated companies, and hadn't held a real job in years. Investigators began catching him in lie after lie. Between what he told them and what he told Tony's brother, Harold gave at least 4 different versions of how the fall happened. And it didn't stop there. In 2011, about a year before her death, Tony was seriously injured when a piece of plywood that she and Harold were moving accidentally fell on her. That incident is now believed to have been his first attempt to kill her. Harold had no good explanation for why he marked the spot of her fall on the map ahead of time. Ultimately, in 2015, he was convicted of murdering Tony Henthorne and sentenced to life in prison. The photos they took just before her death remain a haunting reminder. Just because a couple looks happy in a photo doesn't mean everything is as it seems. Something in the water. At the close of October 2014, a small circle of friends gathered near the Minsk Sea for a laid-back barbecue outdoors. Although the day was meant for relaxation, the weather was unseasonably cold, almost reminiscent of winter, which meant everyone bundled up and even pitched a tent to shield themselves from the biting wind. They settled into a wooden gazebo along the shore, soaking in the tranquil atmosphere while chatting and laughing. During their time there, they snapped nearly 300 photographs of the everyday scenery, candid shots of themselves, the shoreline, and a striking sunset over the chilly water. Later, while sorting through their photos back home, one image stood out unexpectedly. In it, a vague shape resembling a head appeared just above the water's surface, as if it were confidently making its way through the waves. This was particularly puzzling since the cold conditions would hardly encourage anyone to swim casually, and none of the friends had observed anyone in the water that day. Intrigued, they carefully examined more of their shots. Although many pictures captured the reservoir's still surface, not another image revealed any trace of a swimmer. Eager to learn more, the photographer forwarded the photo to UFO.com for a closer analysis. The experts who reviewed the image noted that the people visible on a bench in the background were merely random passersby, having stopped briefly for a warm drink, and bore no relation to the mysterious figure. Initially, some speculated that the shape might have been a winter swimmer, a practice common in some cold regions, but local residents clarified that such swimmers typically do not venture so far into the reservoir. Additionally, none of the witnesses had seen anyone swimming in the frigid conditions that day. Observers pointed out that the head-like shape appeared unusually large and lacked identifiable arms, or the typical water disturbances that would suggest the presence of a swimming person. 3 independent experts scrutinized the photo for signs of digital manipulation, but found no evidence of editing. Furthermore, the metadata verified that the photo was indeed captured on October 20th, 2014, at exactly 3:37 p.m. One specialist did mention that the portion of the image containing the mysterious figure was a bit blurry when zoomed in, yet this did not necessarily indicate any form of trickery. Most experts concurred that the dark shape bore a strong resemblance to a person's head swimming. Some theorized that it might have been a floating boy, but the outline did not match that of any known boy. The idea that the image could be a reflection was also explored. However, given that the photo was taken near a wooden gazebo, not a reflective surface like glass, this theory did not hold up. The possibility of a long exposure creating a ghostly trail was dismissed as well, since the camera used had a short exposure time that made such an effect highly unlikely. The friends then revisited other photographs taken around the same time. One particularly clear shot taken about 15 minutes earlier showed only the calm, unbroken water, and several subsequent photos revealed nothing unusual apart from a partially submerged pipe that did not resemble the mysterious figure. In one image, a boat carrying two people on the opposite shore raised a new question. Could the swimmer have leaped from the vessel? Yet another photo, captured only 3 minutes before the enigmatic figure appeared, still showed both individuals aboard the boat, making it improbable that someone had jumped off and swum away in such a brief window. In the end, no conclusive explanation has ever been found to account for the unidentified swimmer. The most plausible theory remains that the figure was a real, living person who somehow ended up in the water for just a moment. But why it appeared in only one photograph and then vanished from all others continues to baffle investigators. Whether this was the result of an exceptionally skilled swimmer, an optical illusion, or something entirely different remains an open question. Vance family. In the summer of 2023, a family hiking in Colorado's Gunnison National Forest made a grim discovery that would shock the nation. What began as a peaceful day in the mountains ended with a mystery that revealed a heartbreaking tale of fear, isolation, and a family's desperate attempt to escape the world. The story begins with a father and his family returning from a hike near Gold Creek Campground, a remote area in the Rocky Mountains. As they walked back to their car, the father noticed something odd in the woods, a blue tent surrounded by trash and a foul smell. When he got closer, he saw human waste piled near the tent entrance. Overcome by dread, he spotted something even more disturbing, the mummified body of a young boy lying on the ground. He fled immediately and called the police. The next day, investigators arrived and unzipped the tent. Inside, they found the remains of two women, Rebecca Becky Vance and her sister, Christine. Nearby was the body of Becky's 14-year-old son, Talon. Their campsite told a story of suffering, rotting food, torn clothes, and a journal filled with a child's heartbreaking words. Becky and Christine grew up in a broken home. Their parents divorced when they were young, and their mother remarried, giving them a stepsister named Treva. While Christine bonded with Treva, Becky remained quiet and withdrawn, clinging to her mother. When their mother died of cancer in 2007, Becky's grief turned into isolation. She rarely left the house and cut herself off from friends. Years later, Becky had a son, Talon, with a man named Eric. Though they weren't in a relationship, Eric's mother, Marilyn, grew close to Talon during visits. For a time, life seemed stable, until the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Becky, already fearful of the world, fell into online conspiracy theories. She became convinced society was collapsing and that the government couldn't be trusted. By 2021, Becky's fears spiraled out of control. She quit her job, pulled Talon out of school, and stopped letting him see friends. Christine, who lived with Becky and Talon, struggled with depression and loneliness. Over time, Becky convinced her sister to join a radical plan. They would disappear into the wilderness to live off the grid. Treva begged them to reconsider. She even offered them land she owned, where they could stay in a camper. But Becky refused. She wanted total isolation, no neighbors, no roads, no chance of being found. In July 2022, the sisters packed their car with cheap camping gear, a flimsy tent, summer sleeping bags, and water filters that could fail if frozen. Talon, confused but obedient, practiced survival skills like tying knots and identifying plants. In his journal, he wrote goodbye notes to his online friends and his cat, Oreo. The family drove deep into the Rockies, settling at Gold Creek Campground, a remote spot 10,000 feet above sea level. For the first few months, they survived on canned food and occasional trips to the nearby town of Gunnison for supplies. Talon's journal entries during this time mixed childlike innocence with growing despair. During one trip to town, Christine took Talon to Arby's, where he wrote, "I had a mini breakdown because nothing feels the same anymore." At a grocery store, he picked candy for his mother, but felt too numb to choose anything for himself. By October, winter loomed. Becky made a desperate call to her estranged father, asking for $500 to buy a camping stove and matches. It was their last contact with the outside world. Winter arrived early in the mountains. Temperatures dropped to -29 degrees Celsius, and snow buried the trails. The family's summer gear offered no protection. Their water filters froze, leaving them to drink contaminated water. Talon, weak and malnourished, likely died first. Investigators found his body curled in the fetal position outside the tent. Becky died next, her body partially covered by a sleeping bag. Christine, the last survivor, zipped herself fully inside her bag, as if hiding from the inevitable. For months, the campsite sat untouched. Trash piled up, and human waste rotted in the open. Inside the tent, investigators found Christine's driver's license and a faded family photo in Becky's hand. When hikers stumbled upon the scene in July 2023, the truth finally came out. Autopsies revealed the family died of starvation and hypothermia. Their bodies, preserved by the dry mountain air, showed no signs of injury, just the slow, cruel toll of the wilderness. Some believe Becky's fear of society outweighed her survival instinct. Others think the family was too weak or confused to hike out after their car was towed. The wilderness demands respect, and no one should face it without proper gear, skills, or a backup plan. Talon's final journal entry, written days before his death, simply reads, "I hope someday we can go home. I miss Oreo." Our next story takes us into the heart of one of Earth's most unforgiving landscapes, Death Valley National Park. Its name alone evokes danger, and for good reason. This sun-scorched expanse holds the record for the hottest temperature ever recorded on the planet, a blistering 56.7 degrees Celsius in July 1913. Fast forward to July 2010, when three unsuspecting tourists, Donna Cooper, her 19-year-old daughter Gina, and their friend Jenny Lung, set out on what was meant to be a leisurely day trip. Little did they know, their adventure would spiral into a fight for survival against one of nature's cruelest arenas. The day began innocently enough. The trio explored Scotty's Castle, a quirky desert landmark, where Donna bought a souvenir t-shirt. By early afternoon, they climbed back into their Hyundai SUV, eager to return home to Nevada. But as they drove through the park's vast emptiness, a roadside sign caught their eye. The racetrack. This mysterious attraction, known for its sailing stones that glide across a dried lake bed, sparked their curiosity. On impulse, they swerved onto a dusty side road, chasing the promise of a unique sightseeing stop. Here's where technology betrayed them. In 2010, smartphones weren't yet the navigation lifelines they are today. Travelers like Donna relied on dedicated GPS units, clunky devices notorious for malfunctioning in remote areas. Death Valley's labyrinth of unmarked trails and dead-end roads became a death trap for those blindly trusting their gadgets. So common were these tragedies that locals coined the term death by GPS to describe lives lost to faulty directions. Donna, however, had unwavering faith in her GPS. As the Hyundai rattled deeper into the wilderness, the group grew uneasy. The racetrack never materialized. Instead, they found themselves driving in endless circles, surrounded by a monotonous sea of sand and scrub. By dusk, they'd aimlessly covered over 100 miles, their gas gauge hovering near empty and their water bottles nearly drained. At 10 p.m., the car sputtered to a stop. With no cell service and the temperature still a suffocating 38 degrees Celsius, the women faced a grim reality. They'd spend the night trapped in their sweltering metal box. As dawn broke, the mercury skyrocketed to 49 degrees Celsius. Desperation set in. They scoured the barren landscape, finding only a handful of stale crackers and warm soda in the car. Then Gina had an idea. Try starting the car again. Miraculously, the engine roared back to life, briefly. With their last drops of fuel, they limped toward a cluster of trees shimmering in the distance, a sign of possible water. But the car died for good just short of their target. Exhausted and dehydrated, the trio trudged onward on foot, leaving a message scrawled in the dust on their car's rear window. Help. Please call police, with an arrow pointing toward their path. The trees hid an unexpected salvation, abandoned trailers. Inside, they discovered expired canned goods and, crucially, a rusty hose trickling hot, muddy water. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy time. Meanwhile, Donna's eldest daughter, Sky, sensing something wrong from her home in Florida, combed through bank records and traced her mother's last purchase to Scotty's castle. She alerted authorities, sparking a massive search. For days, rescue helicopters crisscrossed the park. Pilots Tyler Johns and Scott Steele, convinced they were on a body recovery mission, nearly called off the search as their own fuel dwindled, but a gut feeling made them take one final pass over Saline Valley. There, they spotted the abandoned Hyundai, and miles away, Gina frantically waving a yellow blanket. Against all odds, the women were alive, sunburned, dehydrated, but breathing. Donna, Gina, and Jenny survived 3 days in conditions that kill most within hours. Reliance on GPS, lack of extra water, and underestimating the desert's scale nearly cost them their lives. On January 6, 2023, experienced hiker Crystal Gonzalez filmed herself ascending Southern California's Mount Baldy. The footage shows treacherous, icy slopes collapsing around her. "This stuff is dangerous," she warns in her post, opting to turn back safely. A 56-year-old mother of 4 and seasoned adventurer, Crystal had summited Baldy many times and was prepared with proper gear. 2 days later, on January 8th, she tried again. Before sunrise, she recorded a final video, smiling and listening to music. Moments later, an SOS alert pinged from the mountain. A hiker had fallen. Witnesses reported Crystal sliding 500 to 700 feet down the steep Baldy Bowl. A rescue helicopter rushed to the scene, but she succumbed to her injuries during evacuation. Though Crystal was experienced and cautious, the accident proved even skilled hikers aren't immune to disaster. Her story is just another reminder that tragedy can strike in seconds, no matter how prepared you are. This chilling photo captures a group praying for a murdered teammate, unaware the killer was among them during the moment. This image shows a group of judo fighters posing after a competition, seemingly celebrating an ordinary victory. Yet lurking within this moment is a harrowing truth. The man on the right, identified as Osama bin Laden, would later become the mastermind behind extremist groups and orchestrate horrific acts of terrorism targeting the United States. A teacher seen rushing had selflessly saved hundreds of lives during the Columbine High School massacre, only to tragically lose his own. Mount Ontake. On September 27, 2014, a few hundred people in Japan set out to climb Mount Ontake, and tragically, over 50 of them never returned home. Just before noon local time, the mountain erupted violently. One of the climbers at the summit was Isumi Noguchi, who managed to snap a photo of himself mere moments before the eruption, a photo that would turn out to be his final one. Despite his camera being battered, the memory card remained intact, preserving his final moments for the world to see. There were other climbers on the summit that day, and at least one more had his final photo captured. A photo of Hideyomi Takahashi, taken just 4 minutes before the eruption, shows him posing, smiling, as if he didn't sense anything terrible was about to occur. The Mount Ontake eruption remains the deadliest in Japan since 1902. May Noguchi, Takahashi, and all the other climbers who lost their lives that day rest in peace. June and Jennifer Gibbons, often referred to as the Silent Twins, were inseparable sisters who withdrew from the world, refusing to speak to anyone outside their bond. They shared a chilling pact. If one sister died, the other vowed to break her silence and live a normal life. After years of isolation and a period in a psychiatric hospital, the twins were eventually released. Tragically, Jennifer died suddenly under unexplained circumstances shortly after their discharge. In a haunting twist, June began speaking the very next day, ending her 2-decade silence, as if fulfilling their eerie agreement. Despite its notorious reputation, Los Angeles local Steve Curry became fixated on the idea of trekking through Death Valley in the summer of 2023. His wife recalled that he had been talking about visiting Death Valley for over a week, even though she repeatedly warned him about the dangerous heat. Unable to change his mind, on Tuesday, July 18, 2023, the 71-year-old ventured into the desert under the blazing sun. Steve was far from a novice when it came to outdoor adventures. He had years of hiking experience under his belt. Yet even the most seasoned hiker is not immune to the perils of 100+ degree temperatures, a fact that Steve was about to experience in a tragic way. His plan was straightforward: start at the Golden Canyon trailhead, make his way to Zabriskie Point, and then return to his car. He set off early in the morning, but as the day wore on, the temperatures soared rapidly. By the time he reached the midpoint of his hike, it was clear that the heat was taking its toll. At Zabriskie Point, Steve sought shelter beneath a metal sign, the only hint of shade available. At that very moment, a Los Angeles Times reporter happened to be at the site, capturing photos and even speaking with him. When asked why he was out hiking in such unbearable conditions, his simple reply was, "Why not?" Despite offers of assistance from bystanders, he stubbornly declined, determined to finish the journey on his own. This resolve, as admirable as it might seem, would soon prove to be his undoing. Shortly after those photos were taken, tragedy struck. Those photographs ended up being the last known images of Steve Curry. Although he eventually left the small patch of shade to continue his trek, the evidence of his physical struggle was unmistakable. After his arduous journey through the desert, Steve managed to return to his car at the trailhead. However, upon arrival, he collapsed outside a restaurant around 3:40 in the afternoon, when the temperature had reached 121 degrees Fahrenheit. A witness immediately called 911, and park rangers arrived within 7 minutes. They performed CPR and even employed an automated external defibrillator, but unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. The heat was so extreme that it even prevented the use of a medical helicopter. The thin air rendered it unsafe for takeoff. This photo, taken in 1991, is the last known image of 12-year-old Jared Negretti. Nearly 33 years later, he is still missing. On July 19, 1991, a Boy Scout troop from Southern California embarked on an overnight backpacking trip in the area surrounding San Gorgonio Mountain. Among the troop was 12-year-old Jared Negretti, an 8th grader from El Monte, California. This was reportedly his first time spending the night in the backcountry. Along with Jared, there were 5 other scouts and 1 adult troop leader overseeing the group. As they climbed the mountain, the group was almost at the summit by around 6 p.m. Jared had fallen behind during the ascent, which initially didn't raise any serious alarms. However, a separate group of hikers took notice. They saw Jared cutting switchbacks on his way up the mountain, something that's frowned upon as bad trail etiquette, and they advised him not to do it. These hikers then informed the troop leader about Jared lagging behind. The troop leader decided not to go back for him, thinking Jared couldn't be far and that they would link up with him on the way back down. This decision would soon become one he deeply regretted. When the troop began their descent, they quickly realized Jared was gone. Jared was known to be a slower hiker, and he should have been positioned at the front or middle of the group. Putting him in the back is exactly how people get left behind. Once they understood the gravity of the situation, the troop hiked out of the mountain in the dark to get help. Authorities launched a search immediately. They knew Jared had taken some limited camping gear with him, along with a few snacks and a 2-liter water bottle. Fortunately, the weather conditions were mild, and there was ample water in the area, which gave rescuers hope that Jared might survive long enough to be found. Early in the search, investigators discovered some promising clues. They found footprints that matched Jared's shoes. They also came across some snack wrappers and, most notably, Jared's film camera. They rushed to develop the film in hopes of learning more. The roll contained 12 photos. 11 were scenic shots, ordinary images likely taken before he went missing. But the 12th and final photo was unsettling. It was a close-up selfie of Jared's face, seemingly taken in the dark. The flash had gone off, indicating it was very dim wherever he was. This eerie image is believed to be the last ever taken of him. Unfortunately, it didn't provide any information about his location or condition. Investigators suspect that Jared may have slid down the mountain, possibly trying to reach a river below. During this descent, it's believed he either dropped the camera and snack wrappers or left them behind unintentionally. Searchers focused intensely on the area where these items were found. Thousands of volunteers participated, along with helicopters and mounted search teams. Despite this massive effort, no sign of Jared was ever found again, and that's where this case stands today. On an October day in 2010, experienced hiker and volunteer rescuer Pam Bales set out to climb Mount Washington in New Hampshire. She expected nothing more than a routine solo hike, something she had done countless times before, even on this very mountain. But as the skies darkened and temperatures dropped, the mountain transformed into a deadly battleground of snow, wind, and freezing cold. Despite the brutal conditions, it wasn't the storm that would become Pam's greatest concern. As she trudged through near whiteout weather, something unexpected caught her eye: footprints in the snow. These tracks veered her off her planned route and into a mystery she couldn't ignore. Pam wasn't alone on the mountain. Someone else had wandered into the storm, and when she eventually found them, they were barely clinging to life. The man Pam discovered was in dire straits, on the brink of death. He refused to tell her his name, barely spoke, and wouldn't even meet her gaze. The storm raged around them, and every choice Pam made in that moment became a matter of life or death. She risked everything to save a complete stranger who didn't want to be found. Eventually, she brought him down the mountain and reached the safety of her car. But even then, the story was far from over. Pam was left haunted by what had just happened. Who was this man? Why was he so unprepared for such harsh conditions? And why had he refused to speak or give his name? These questions followed her for days until she received an anonymous letter in the mail. Its contents revealed a chilling truth, one that would completely change her understanding of what happened on Mount Washington that day. Mount Washington doesn't often come to mind when people think of dangerous mountains. Maybe if you're from the Northeast, you know about its reputation. But generally, names like Everest or K2 dominate those lists. Still, despite being only a little over 6,000 feet tall, Mount Washington has a deadly legacy. Over 160 people have lost their lives there, making it the most dangerous mountain on the East Coast and among the deadliest in the country. Its unpredictability and brutal weather are infamous, especially in the winter and shoulder seasons. The mountain's proximity to major cities like Boston and New York draws in plenty of hikers, many of them in the summer. But when October rolls in and the temperatures drop, only the most experienced continue to challenge it. Pam Bales was one of those people. A nurse and a seasoned hiker, Pam had volunteered for the Pemigewasset Valley Search and Rescue Team for over 5 years. She knew Mount Washington inside and out and had all the necessary gear for her solo loop hike. She left detailed plans in her car in case of emergency and checked the forecast, which predicted 0-degree wind chills and winds up to 80 miles per hour. As she ascended the mountain via the Jewel Trail, Pam took a series of selfies. Layer by layer, she added clothing to fight the worsening conditions, eventually donning snow goggles as the wind whipped snow into blinding swirls. Just a few miles in, she began to reconsider her summit attempt. The final stretch was less than 1,000 vertical feet, but the risk was growing. Then, she noticed the footprints, strange ones. Not the kind left by winter hiking boots, but the flat, smooth prints of sneakers. Alarmed, Pam realized someone had gone into the storm wearing just tennis shoes. Whoever it was had no business being out in such conditions. But rather than turn back and leave this person to their fate, Pam pressed forward. She followed the prints as they veered sharply off the trail and into the Great Gulf, one of Mount Washington's most unforgiving areas. She knew that whoever was out there likely wouldn't survive without help. And she also knew the danger she was putting herself in. Still, she couldn't ignore the situation. Shouting and blowing her whistle, she moved deeper into the storm. Eventually, she found him. The man was sitting motionless against an icy boulder, barely conscious and slowly freezing to death. Just as the footprints suggested, he was wearing sneakers. His clothes were grossly inadequate, a light jacket, shorts, and thin gloves. Yet somehow, he was still alive. Pam approached him, greeted him, and noticed a flicker of awareness in his eyes, but he didn't speak. Undeterred, she wrapped him in warm layers, gave him hot chocolate from her thermos, and applied hand warmers to his body. She tried to talk to him, asked for his name, but he didn't respond. She still didn't give up. She decided to call him John, and worked to stabilize him enough to move. Eventually, he began to speak, offering a vague, confusing explanation for how he'd gotten there. It didn't make much sense. He remained unwilling to share his name. But Pam kept him moving, kept him alive. Although Pam found John's behavior strange, his distant, evasive mannerisms, the way he seemed detached from his own survival, there was no time to question it. That would have to come later. For now, she understood one critical thing. If this man didn't start moving soon, he wouldn't survive. With that sense of urgency in her chest, Pam pulled John to his feet and began guiding him down the mountain. The weather had worsened since she'd found him. The storm was now so severe that she could barely make out the trail she'd carved just an hour before. Snow swirled around them in thick sheets, and the world was reduced to a blur of white and cold. But still, they pressed on slowly and carefully into the blizzard. Then suddenly, John collapsed. They had barely made it half a mile when he fell to the ground and curled up into a ball. It was more than just exhaustion. He had given up. For the first time, he spoke clearly to Pam. He told her he was too tired to continue, that she should leave him and go on without him, that he didn't care anymore. Pam wasn't having it. With a fire in her voice, she refused to let him quit. She coaxed, pushed, and ultimately pulled him back to his feet. There was no way she was leaving him behind, not in that storm, not like that. Their descent was painfully slow and dangerous. Pam, already exhausted, now carried the weight of two people, physically and emotionally. She worried constantly that John would collapse again, that this time he wouldn't get up. His behavior confused her. She'd worked with hypothermic patients before, but this felt different. It wasn't just the cold that had hollowed him out. There was something else going on, something much deeper. Still, she kept him moving. She talked to him, encouraged him, even sang to him at one point. Anything to break the crushing silence and lift the weight of whatever it was that he was carrying. Hours passed. Darkness fell, and the only light guiding their way was Pam's headlamp. Finally, 6 brutal hours after she'd gotten John to his feet, they reached the trailhead. Their cars, safety. Somehow, against all odds, both of them had made it down the mountain alive. But even now, John wouldn't give Pam his name. He had no dry clothes in his vehicle, so Pam turned on her car, warmed up his soaked garments for him, and tried once more to make sense of what had happened. Why had he gone up the mountain so unprepared? And most hauntingly, what would have happened if she hadn't been there? John said nothing. He thanked her, took his clothes, started his car, and drove off into the night, refusing to share even the most basic details about himself. Pam stood there, watching his taillights disappear, flooded with questions that had no answers. In all her years of rescue work, nothing had prepared her for this. The gratitude John showed was real, but everything else, his silence, his strange behavior, it lingered with her like a shadow. She returned home shaken, and in the days that followed, she shared the story with her team at Pemigewasset Valley Search and Rescue. They were just as baffled. Who was this man? What had he been doing up there? Why had he refused to identify himself? And then, 1 week later, a letter arrived. It was addressed to the president of their organization. Alongside it was a small donation. The letter would go on to become the most profound and powerful piece of correspondence the organization had ever received. In it, John, finally, told the truth. I went up my favorite trail, Jewel Trail, on Sunday, October 17th, to end my life. He had chosen that day, that trail, that storm, believing he'd be alone. Dressed in light clothing, he intended to die quickly. But then, out of nowhere, Pam appeared. She talked to him, warmed him, fed him, called him John, and he let her. He even considered running away so she wouldn't have to deal with him, but didn't. Because deep down, something about her presence told him he mattered. That he wasn't invisible. With all that has been going wrong in my life, he wrote, I didn't matter to me, but I did to Pam. She never judged him, never berated him for his condition, though in his words she did chew him out in a kind way. That mattered. Her care, her compassion, her refusal to give up on him, that mattered. Maybe I wasn't meant to die yet, he wrote. I somehow still mattered in life. In the days after the rescue, he had found help, mental health care, temporary housing, even job support, and he credited it all to Pam and her refusal to walk away. If she is an example of your organization's professionalism, you must be the best group around. Pam had believed she was saving a lost hiker, but in truth, she had saved a man from something far worse than a winter storm. In the darkest moment of his life, she was a light, a reminder that even in despair, there is hope. Even when we feel invisible, someone still sees us. John has never come forward publicly. He never contacted Pam again. But maybe that's how it was meant to be. What matters is not whether they reconnected, but that both of them made it off that mountain, alive. Pam's incredible act of courage and compassion inspired the 2022 film Infinite Storm, with Naomi Watts portraying Pam and Billy Howell as John. The movie brought well-deserved recognition to Pam, though she stayed largely out of the spotlight since then. Just as humble and selfless as she was that day on the mountain. She didn't do it for praise. She didn't do it for a movie deal. She did it because someone needed help.